Hi there guys, it's Matt here, and today I'm going to be showing you a quick tutorial on how to actually implement RTK into flashcards and into basically the system that I use and a lot of other people that are really successful with RTK use to efficiently learn 3,000, 2,000 or 3,000 kanji if you want to do the extra 1,000 in pretty much a couple of months. So today I'm going to show you exactly how I go through this, the step-by-step process, and I'll also be leaving a link to a blog post that I've written that gives you a full in-depth tutorial of why you should use this method and how to actually go through it as well. So in this video I'm just going to show you the how, and literally how to set everything up, and I'm not going to explain why and all that behind it because it would just take too long. So the first thing you're going to want to do if you haven't already done it is to go and buy Remembering the Kanji, okay? You're going to need the book really to sort of give yourself a helping hand, because this tutorial and the tutorial I've written, although are very detailed and include a lot of information, and I think you could probably get away with not buying the book if you just read the blog post that I've written about this. It is still a good idea to have the book as well, because there's a lot of things that James Heisig actually mentions in the book that won't be in the content that I've made for you, okay? So I recommend you get the book, and it just helps. It helps as well because it helps you understand the method a bit more if you don't already fully get it. So I definitely recommend you do that. Next thing I'm going to want to do is go and install Anki, okay? Now this is a piece of software, it's a flashcard software, and it uses, it's called an SRS. It basically uses a thing called spaced repetition to organize your reviews for your flashcards. So the reason we want to use an SRS like Anki is because it basically efficiently spreads out your flashcard reviews, which makes not only your studying easier because you're not actually having to remember, you're not actually having to revise every single piece of information. So in this case, every kanji every day, you're not having to go through all of them. Instead, it's spread out. It's actually spread out in the most efficient way possible. So you're gonna see the kanji again just before you forget it. And of course, if you just think about it, that makes everything more efficient because it's all spaced out, as I just said. But it also, based on some research, on memory research, it actually makes it easier for you to remember things just before you're about to forget it. So if you are about to forget someone's name, and then you see that person and you remember their name, then you're actually more likely to have that name, their name, stuck in your long-term memory for a longer period of time. And that's just basically what Anki does. It plays on that part of the human memory, and it just makes the whole learning process more efficient. So we're going to use this piece of software. So you just click download, and then it'll take you to this part. You choose which operating system you're on, and then just download it. Now, I've already got it installed, so I'm not going to do that. But once you've downloaded it, you should be shown this screen, or it will be similar to this. You won't have these decks installed yet. These are the decks that I've made, which I'm going to show you in a second. And actually, yours might be in English, so I'm just going to change mine back to English just to make it easier for this tutorial. Now in the post that I've written, or the full post I've written on how to do this, I've actually kept mine in Japanese because I started off doing it in Japanese, and then I realized in a recent update on Anki you can actually change the language settings in the preferences, which I didn't know you could do until recently. Like before, you couldn't do that unless you actually deleted some files in Anki. So if you read the tutorial, then just bear with the Japanese. But it's better for you really that you just change it into Japanese now. In fact, I recommend you put Anki straight into Japanese now because it gives you more of a chance of picking up words and stuff when you use it. Sure, it'll be a little bit harder to use it, and it'll be a bit difficult, a bit more difficult for you to actually pick up all the terminology. But I still think it's a great idea. And from day one, if you're going to be wanting to learn Japanese and you're going to want to actually get really good at Japanese, you need to surround yourself in Japanese as much as you can. So I highly recommend you just change it to Japanese. But for this tutorial, just to make it easier, I'm just going to show you how to do it in English. So the first thing we're going to want to do then is, once we've opened up Anki, we're not going to have any decks. Okay, you won't have these two decks here. So we're going to actually want to install the decks that I've made for you. Now, when you're doing remembering the kanji, it is actually highly recommended that you make your own decks and that you don't actually use pre-made decks, because stuff's just going to stick better, the kanji going to stick better. The process of you putting the kanji into your flashcard and then actually learning it like that is going to be easier for you, because having that process just helps it stick a little bit better. However, if you've got a physical copy of RTK and you don't have a digital copy of it and you can't copy and paste, then you're going to want to use my deck. Okay, so I'm going to send you I'm going to have a link to this deck down in the description below. It is very simple, very basic. and it doesn't have anything except the kanji, the keyword, the stroke count, and the Heisig number. Okay, it has a space for your story, but I don't give you a story because you need to make your own stories. Okay, if you don't make your own stories, you're not going to remember some of the kanji very well. Sure, some stories will be great. When I say some stories will be great, what I mean is like the stories that Heisig gives you in his book. Sure, you can borrow those sometimes, and there's even there's a website which I'll introduce to you later where you can actually get where it's basically a community for remembering the kanji, and everybody shares their stories, and you can use that as well. But again, I would only use it sparingly. And I'd only use it when you can't actually figure out a story for yourself and you're really stuck, okay? Because those stories, the stories that you make, you're going to remember better. The stories that other people make, you're not going to remember very well. It's just the way it goes. I've done this before. It just works like that. It's difficult remembering other people's stories because there's no personal attachment to them, right? So if you just have a quick read through the description of this deck once you go to the page and you can understand what it's about more. If you've read through Remembering the Kanji, or you have a basic idea of what it is so far, then you'll know that the idea of the program or the method is to understand the meaning and how a kanji is written, right? We don't learn readings, we don't learn anything else to do with the kanji. We just associate the kanji with an English keyword. So that's exactly what this deck does. It gives you the kanji, and then it gives you the keyword, right? And then you'll make a story which allows you to associate the two together and help you sort of picture the kanji and help you be able to write it from hand, okay? So what we're going to do to be able to do that, we're going to have to use another deck, although you don't have to use this deck. The reason why I say you don't have to is because I never used it, and I managed to get on with doing it okay. But again, when I first did it, I used a lot of other people's stories. So I had hints to what the primitives were. It's a little bit hard for me to explain, but essentially I didn't use any primitives. I just sort of guessed and sort of, plowed through it. And that was really tough for me the first time I did it. I've actually done RTK again because I did it too fast, and I did it in the wrong way. I say I did it in the wrong way. I basically did it in a way that prevented me from learning how to write kanji from hand. And I've since wanted to start writing it by hand again, so I've ended up having to go back through RTK and do it all again. Okay, so I'm going to mention the differences between these two methods in this video as well, so don't worry about that. I'll talk about that in a bit. So I highly recommend that you do download this, but as I say, you don't need to do it, I don't think. You can get away with not doing the primitive deck. But as I say, it's only 234 flashcards, and they're pretty simple ones as well. But if you get these meanings down, then you should find that you'll pick up the rest of the kanji a lot quicker, because you'll have the primitive meanings already in your head, and your brain just remembers things better from smaller. It's easier to remember smaller pieces of information and then build on top of them. Than it is to just, remember really difficult kanji and sort of trying to work out all the primitives at the same time. So it might be a better idea for you to download this deck first and quickly blast through it, and then do this Remembering the Kanji deck afterwards, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to assume that you've done this, and that you know the primitives, or that you have a primitive, like a sheet of the primitives, which actually I can get for you right now. So I'll put a link to that in the description as well. There is basically a website that has uploaded a list of all the kanji and all the keywords that Heisig uses. So I will link that down below, and I'll see if I can just find it. So this is the website that I was just talking about. I'll leave a link to this in the description below, but essentially you have all the primitive parts and you have the keyword meanings underneath. And I think it's a good idea that you have this open whilst you're doing each kanji, because it'll allow you, it just makes the whole process of making the stories quicker, because you have a reference to build from. So try and have this open when you're making stories. So I'm just going to put this to one side for now. And I'm going to assume that you've, as I say, that you've done this deck, or that you're using this, and that you've downloaded my RTK deck. So once you've downloaded the deck, it should be in your downloads folder. And from there, you can just double click on the icon, and if you've got Anki open, it should just open. You can go to File, Import, and actually just search for the deck and it should be in your downloads folder somewhere. And once you've done that, once you've imported it, the deck should just appear here. Anki will say it's imported, something like 3,000 words or something, and it should appear right here. So what you're going to do then is you want to click on the deck and click Study Now, and what you'll see is the first keyword, which in this case is 1. Okay. So if you press Enter or Space to show the back of the card, sorry, I went a bit too fast then what you'll then see is 4 different types of fonts for the kanji, and this was an idea that I ended up taking from one of BritVsJapan's videos recently that he did about this. I used to originally only have the stroke order font, which is this font here, which has a little number to tell you how to write the kanji. But I think it's a good idea to have these 2 extra fonts in this font here as well, because these 2 fonts are basically the most common fonts you're going to see basically in print. So these will be the fonts that you'll see on Japanese websites and on computers and when you type kanji. And they are ever so slightly different to how kanji are written in some respects. Okay, most of the time it's just usually a slight font difference, so they just look slightly neater and sort of cleaner. But in other cases, like kanji can look completely different when they're written and when they're displayed on a computer. So I've put that into this card format just to make that clearer for you. And as I say, that's something from BritVsJapan's video, and I'll put a link to that in the description below as well, because I think that's a very useful video on setting up this card layout right. Okay, so then you'll also see the keyword again. And the reason for this is once you press Enter, you'll find that if you're doing this on your phone, you will often get like the back of the card will often be quite big, and you might forget what the keyword is, or it's just easier to see the keyword on the back when instead of scrolling way back up again, scrolling back down. The next part you'll see the location, like the field where your story goes. So this is where you'll put your story to remember the kanji. Then you'll see the number of strokes, and then you'll see the Heisig number. Now, the reason I've got the number of strokes there is because when you're writing the kanji out, you want to, as you write each stroke, you want to try and count the strokes in your head whilst you're doing it. And then afterwards, when you press the space bar and you show the back of the card, you can then quickly check to see that you've written the right amount of strokes. Okay. The other way of doing it is, of course, just going back over and trying to remember every stroke that you did, but that can sometimes be a bit tedious. So that's just an easy way of doing it. Right, so from here, what you want to do is just, make your story. So if you've read RTK, you'll know that we use the story method, or which is a type of mnemonic, which is just a way of helping you remember how to remember a certain piece of information by joining other things together, right? So I've got a few tips for actually making stories, and I'm not going to go through all of them in this video, and as I say, I've got a big article on this, and I go through them a bit more in that article. But all I want to say is essentially try and get as crazy as you can with your stories. So for example, one of the ways to really get things stuck in your memory is to make them really obscure and abnormal. Okay, so if we take this kanji for example, we've got the top part which is craft, and the bottom part which is shellfish. Okay, this part here, 1, 2, 3 is craft, and then the 4th stroke going up to the 10th stroke, that's shellfish. Okay, they're 2 separate kanji, and they've been joined together to make tribute. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and make a story combining those 2 keywords. So it could literally be anything as long as it includes those 2 primitive keywords and it includes the final keyword tribute. Okay. Now in this case we have craft on the top part. Okay, on the top of shellfish. So I would recommend that you try and include that in your story. So if you try and make sure that you sort of get the image of craft being above shellfish somehow, then that's great. And it will just help you to remember where the craft primitive is when you write it out. Another tip is to really get crazy with your stories. It's really good. It's really easy for your brain to remember really obscure stuff, anything that's out of the normal. For example, this is a completely different memory technique. It's got nothing to do with this, but if you remember something in the middle of the night, if you say you wake up and you get this really cool idea, then you can actually change something around your room, right? You just sort of move something in a weird position, say turn your screen upside down or put your chair upside down or do something really weird. And then in the morning when you wake up, you'll actually remember, because you'll be like, why is that like that? That's so weird. And your brain clicks and it it just remembers exactly what you were thinking the night before. It's a completely random. It's got nothing really to do with this, but it just kind of shows how your brain sort of remembers really weird stuff, and the weird sort of helps you to remember things. So one of the biggest tips, or one of the biggest things that I do in my stories is use obscure sizes. So for example, for this one, I could imagine like a massive shellfish that's like as big as London itself, like it's hovering over London, for example, and it's crafting a massive spaceship, and then it's going to attribute that to England as a I'm going to give it to you, England. It's my tribute. You know, you could just make it something really weird and obscure, and I can guarantee that you won't forget that. Now, that was a really random story, and it's probably not the story that I would go with, but you kind of get the idea, right? You're just going to make it weird and sort of go crazy. And as I say, in this case, you're going to have the story. You want to try and make sure that the shellfish is underneath the craft. So you want to imagine the shellfish crafting like this. We'll have the spaceship above him, and then we'll have the shellfish crafting like as if he's working underneath the shellfish. It's underneath the spaceship, and he's working from the bottom up. So that will help you to remember that craft is above shellfish. Another tip that you could also use is try to use your spatial memory, and your spatial memory is incredibly powerful. You can actually remember your locations and stuff really easily. So, for example, your house. That's probably because you could argue that's because you're there every day, pretty much, and you know it inside out, and because you always lived there. But if you remember all the houses you've ever lived in, if you can remember the schools that you've went to, you usually remember all the layout of all the schools that you've went to. All your workplaces, the ways to get to work from your house, all these different things that you go through every single day, or even if you don't go every single day, but you've been to more than a couple of times, then you'll often have a really good memory for those locations, and you can actually implement that in your stories. So for example, you could say that there was a shellfish floating outside your bedroom window, and he was crafting, something. I don't know what. He could be crafting anything, but he's just floating outside your bedroom window. And having that picture of him outside your bedroom window, because it's something that you're so used to, and because it's a part of memory that you're so knowledgeable about, and it just helps it stick. I don't really know the ins and outs of it, but spatial memory works. So just try and think about locations that you know about and how you can implement them into your stories. And that's pretty much it. Once you've created your stories, all you've got to do is just go through each card one at a time and just, create your story. As you create your story, you want to write it out once. Then you want to hit good, and then you want to go to the next one, and then hit good, and go to the next one, and go to the next one. With the primitives, as I say, you're probably going to want to use this cheat sheet, because it'll allow you to get all the keywords and help you to create stories based on all these, and it'll just help you to build your stories, basically. Now, one thing I will talk about quickly is this method currently is going to teach you how to write by hand, right? This is teaching you how to recall kanji from memory, because you are first seeing the keyword, and then you'll be seeing the kanji on the back of the card, along with your story and everything else. So the only cue you'll get is the keyword, and from the keyword you have to try and remember the story, and then with the story you remember where the primitives are, and then from that you can remember how to write the kanji out. And that's training you how to write the kanji from memory. And by doing that, you'll also still learn to recognize the kanji, right? That still is a natural part of that process, because when you hit the back of the card, you'll actually see it. However, if you don't care about writing by hand, which I highly recommend you still do, and I don't really want to teach you how to do this, because it's not great, because expecting in a year's time you might think, actually I want to write by hand, but some people just really don't care about it, so I will mention it quickly. If you want to do that, then you can just switch the kanji and the keyword. So you can just put the keyword on this side, like down here, and delete this, and then put the kanji on the front. And then that means you'll see the kanji, and you have to try and remember the keyword and the story. And that just teaches you how to recognize the kanji. It doesn't teach you how to recall them. And this is how I did RTK the first time. And to be fair, I did it really quickly. I did it within like 2 months-ish, probably a little bit longer. And I got all the kanji out of the way, and I started learning to read Japanese. And then within a year, I was like, I wonder when I'm actually going to be able to write by hand. Because at the time, I was like, right, I'm going to try and write something. And I tried writing something by hand, and the kanji just wouldn't come. They wouldn't come out of my head. It was just really shady. Like, they would just be really sort of fuzzy in my mind, if that makes sense, when I try to remember them. So, it's not recommended that you do it like that, but you can do it like that if you want to. If you really, really know that you're never going to be able to, you're never going to want to write kanji by hand, and you're never going to need it. Like, say, for example, you're never going to move to Japan, and you're just sort of learning kanji because you want to be able to read Japanese books and stuff, but you're never actually wanting to go and live there, for example, then you can do this if you want to. And so to do that, what you're going to want to do is press E on any of the flashcards that you're studying, and that should open up the edit card window. Now from here you can click cards, and then all you can do is on this specific flashcard type, like my deck, the card type of my deck, all you're going to have to do is just delete the code in front template, and then you can just copy and paste these 4 lines, which are for the 4 kanji fonts, and put them on the front. Now what this will do, if you go back to the card, if we hit enter, you'll see all 4 kanji, and then you'll just see on the back, you'll see the keyword, and then the story once you've made it, and then your strokes, and then the Heisek number. And then all you've got to do is try and remember the keyword based on the kanji, and you'll still learn to, as I say, recognize them, and you'll still be able to learn to read Japanese because, as I say, I've done it, it works. But you will never be able to write by hand. It just won't come to you, okay? So just bear that in mind before you do that. And as I say, I don't really recommend that you do it. Okay, so that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. I will quickly introduce a website called Kanji Koohii, which is a website that is kind of built around a huge community of learners who use Remembering the Kanji. And essentially everybody submits their own stories. And you can actually learn the kanji through this website itself. It has a built-in SRS, so you don't need to use Anki if you don't want to. However, I still prefer to use Anki. It's better. It saves your data, it backs it up, so you don't need to worry about that. But if you make an account on Kanji Koohii, I'll just show it to you here. I'll put a link to this in the description, by the way. If you make an account, then once you click study, you can click browse, and then you'll get this little search box here. And in here, you can just type in any kanji you want. So I'm just going to type in, let's see, I. That's the first one that came into my mind, and that means love, right? So we're just going to enter this, and what you'll see here is you'll see shared stories by the community, and they'll all have like stars. So the more popular it is, the more stars it'll have, so the more people have used it. So the ones at the top are usually the ones that are pretty good, and then you can just copy and paste these and then chuck them into your My Story section. Now the only time I'd recommend that you do this is when you really can't think of the story and that you just really don't know, like you need to move on to the next kanji and you can't think of a story, right? So that's the only time I ever recommend doing this. But yeah, try and make your own stories. Okay, if you don't make your own stories, you're not going to remember them as well, and it's just going to be a harder process for you. It's quicker if you just make your own stories, spend the 3 to 5 minutes making your own stories, than it is to just copy and paste someone else's story and try and really remember their story. Okay, if you make your own stories, it just sticks so much better, and you'll have a higher retention rate, and it will be easier, honestly. So don't be lazy, because taking the lazy route in this case is going to be more painful for you. That's pretty much it for this tutorial, guys. As I said earlier, I haven't actually talked about a lot of the other stuff that I've written in my blog post. There's a lot of other stuff that in there that will help you out during this process, and I go into the process in a lot more detail. I also talk about changing Anki settings to make it all more efficient for you, and also talk about remembering the kanji and other tips and tricks that you can use. So I definitely recommend you check out the blog post, which will be linked in the description below. So I hope you guys found this video useful, and I will see you guys in the next video. I just wanted to say a massive thank you to Diedrich and everybody else guys who support me on Patreon so far. It means so much to me, and I'm hoping to make some really useful content for you guys and for everybody else who's trying to learn a language out there. If you are interested in actually learning how to learn Japanese or any other language, then definitely check out my Patreon. I'm going to be making some awesome content for you guys in the next few months, and I also hope to put out some new content to my YouTube channel and my website, so stay tuned for that. If you go to my Patreon though, you can get access to this content earlier, and you can also get access to other content that I won't be putting out on my website just yet. Alright, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.